I sat there, staring at my phone screen. The notification pinged, an innocent little buzz that shattered my world in an instant. It was from her, my wife, Emily. Just a regular day, or so I thought. I was at the office, pretending to focus on some meaningless report, when I saw the video file she accidentally sent to me on Messenger. It didn't have a title. No explanation. Just a file. Curiosity didn't take long to get the best of me. I clicked on it, and for a split second, I didn't register what I was seeing. It was blurry at first, the angle awkward, like a phone propped up on something. Then it hit me, the unmistakable image of my wife, naked, straddling another man. A man I didn't recognize. My chest tightened, a sick, crushing weight sinking into my stomach. Every breath felt like a battle, and my hands started trembling uncontrollably. I felt like I was dying, like someone had reached inside and ripped out my soul. I paused the video. Couldn't watch it anymore. But the damage was already done. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unhear her moans, her laughter, her body moving in ways I hadn't seen in years, not with me anyway. My first instinct was to call her. To scream. To demand an explanation. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the sudden realization that my marriage, my life as I knew it, had just collapsed. Or maybe it was something else, something deeper, darker. Instead, I sat there, my mind racing. She didn't know I'd seen it. She hadn't realized she sent it to me. I knew that much. Her usual texts kept coming in after that, as if nothing had changed. "What time will you be home? I'm thinking of making dinner." Dinner. Right. I decided in that moment that I wasn't going to let her know. Not yet. Let her think she'd gotten away with it. Let her live in ignorance while I figured out what to do next. Because I wasn't just going to walk away, head hung low like some broken man. No, if she wanted to play this game, I'd make sure it ended on my terms. I hit save on the video. Not out of spite, though that was there too, but for evidence. I'd need it. I wasn't sure how yet, but I would. Emily, my wife of 7 years. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had just torn my world apart in the most gut-wrenching way possible. And she didn't even know it yet. This was just the beginning. The rest of that day was a blur, a haze of forced conversations and fake smiles. I made it through work on autopilot, though I couldn't tell you a single thing I did. My mind was trapped in that video, in the betrayal, in the way her body moved with someone else. It played on a loop, and every time I blinked, I saw flashes of it. I felt sick. Angry. Helpless. But I held it together. I had to. If I confronted her too soon, it would all fall apart. So, when I got home that night, I did what I always did. I kissed her on the cheek and asked about her day. She looked so normal, so casual, as she stood at the stove, cooking pasta like nothing was wrong. I felt bile rise in my throat. How could she stand there, smile at me, after what I'd seen? She turned, handed me a glass of wine. "You look tired," she said, her voice soft, concerned. "Long day?" I nodded, forced a smile. "Yeah, a little. How about you?" Her face lit up in a way that used to bring me joy. Now, it just made me want to scream. "Not too bad. I went to yoga this morning, and I'm thinking of doing a girls' night next weekend. What do you think?" Girls' night. Of course. The perfect cover for her late-night rendezvous. "Sounds fun," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'll hang out with the guys." She smiled at that, leaned in and kissed me, just a quick peck, nothing passionate. Nothing like the fire I saw in that video. I couldn't stand it. I pulled away, pretending I had something to do. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. This wasn't the Emily I thought I knew. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been blind for years. What else was she hiding? How long had this been going on? I pulled out my phone again, staring at the video, debating if I should watch it through. I needed to know more, even if it broke me. But I couldn't bring myself to hit play. Not yet. Suddenly, her voice broke through my thoughts. Hey, are you coming down for dinner? I snapped the phone shut and called back. Yeah, just a minute. I took a deep breath, shoved the phone in my pocket, and put on my mask again. As I walked down the stairs, I realized something. She thought I was clueless. She thought she could lie to my face, share a bed with me, and keep up this charade. And that gave me power. I could play the long game, pretend nothing was wrong, while I figured out how to dismantle her entire world. I sat down at the table, across from her, and smiled. This looks great, I said. My tone was warm, almost too warm. She smiled back, oblivious. But inside, I was already planning my next move. This wasn't just going to be a confrontation. It was going to be a reckoning. And I wasn't the only one who would lose something. Days passed, and I fell into a rhythm of pretending everything was fine. Every morning, I'd kiss her on the cheek, sip the coffee she made, and act like the husband she thought I still was. But at night, when she wasn't looking, I started digging deeper. I became obsessed with finding out everything I could about the man from the video. I had no name, no idea where he came from. But I knew what he looked like, and that was enough to start. I found myself scrolling through her social media, looking at every post, every comment. Still nothing. It wasn't until one evening, when she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, that I got my first real clue. I was supposed to be taking out the trash when I saw it, a notification from a message request she hadn't accepted yet. It was from someone named Adam. The message preview was short but enough to set my blood boiling. Had a great time last week. Can't wait for round 2. Round 2. I froze, staring at the screen, my heart pounding so loudly I thought she might hear it from the next room. I glanced around. She was in the shower, oblivious. I took the chance and clicked on the message. It was him. The man from the video. Adam. I clicked through their chat history, but most of the messages were gone. Deleted. She was covering her tracks, smart, but not smart enough. She didn't realize I had already caught her in the act. The anger was almost unbearable. But I kept my cool. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I clicked back to the main page of her messages, leaving everything as I found it. I closed the laptop, set it back where she'd left it, and went upstairs. The shower was still running. I leaned against the wall outside the bathroom, listening to the sound of the water. She was humming softly, a carefree tune, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. It made me sick. That night, as we lay in bed, I turned to her. She was reading some book, looking peaceful, serene. I decided to test the waters. You know, I started, my voice casual. I've been thinking we should take a trip. Just the two of us. Somewhere far away. Maybe the mountains? She looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Really? We haven't done something like that in years. I shrugged, trying to play it off. Yeah, I think it'd be good for us. We've both been so busy, and well, I miss us. Her face softened. I miss us too, she said quietly, reaching out to squeeze my hand. For a second, guilt stabbed through me. She looked so normal. So much like the woman I married. But I knew better now. I knew what she was capable of, and that version of her was a lie. Let's do it, she said, a little smile playing at her lips. It sounds perfect. Perfect. She thought she still had me fooled. Great, I said, smiling back. But inside, I was already plotting. This trip wouldn't be about healing or reconnecting. It would be something else entirely. I just had to bide my time. The days leading up to our trip felt like a blur. I played the role of the doting husband, but underneath the surface, I was making my moves. I started tracking her. It wasn't hard. An app here, a hidden camera there. Every time she left the house, I knew exactly where she was going. And then it happened, something unexpected. A mistake on her part. One afternoon, I checked the camera feed from our front door, and there he was. Adam. He was standing there, bold as anything, waiting for her to let him in. I couldn't believe it. The audacity. I watched as she opened the door, smiling at him, and led him inside. I was at work, but I left immediately. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there, but I knew I needed to see it with my own eyes. I drove like a madman, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. By the time I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I parked down the street, heart hammering, and slipped in through the back door. I could hear their voices, low and soft, coming from upstairs. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. But I didn't barge in. I didn't confront them. Instead, I crept closer, listening. Their words hit me like a punch to the gut. I think he suspects something, Emily said, her voice full of anxiety. He's been acting weird. Relax, Adam replied. He doesn't know. If he did, you'd already be out on the street. My blood turned to ice. They were mocking me, playing me for a fool in my own home. I turned away, biting back the urge to explode. Not yet. Not here. I needed to control myself. There would be a time, a place. And when it came, neither of them would see it coming. I drove around aimlessly after I left the house, the sound of their voices still ringing in my ears. If he did, you'd already be out on the street. Adam's words taunted me, mocking me. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought I was clueless. But I was done playing the fool. I pulled over at a quiet spot near the river, staring out into the water. My mind was racing with 1,000 different thoughts. Anger, hurt, betrayal, they all swirled around inside me, but underneath all that was something else. A cold, calculating resolve. They wouldn't get away with this. Emily and Adam had no idea what was coming. I took out my phone and scrolled through the video she'd sent me again. It felt like a dagger twisting in my chest, but I forced myself to watch. I needed to burn this moment into my memory. To fuel the fire inside me. Every detail mattered now. I had to be smart, precise. Watching them, seeing her like that with him, wasn't just painful, it was motivating. I knew I had to hit them where it hurt, to make them pay. And the first step was making sure that everything appeared normal, even as I began planting the seeds for what came next. When I got home later that evening, Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I wondered if she felt even the slightest bit guilty. Did she feel anything at all for me anymore? Or had she completely buried whatever love we once had beneath her lies? I forced a smile as I walked in. Hey, I said casually, tossing my keys onto the counter. How was your day? She looked up, her face lighting up with that practiced smile I'd come to hate. Oh, it was fine. Just ran some errands, cleaned up a bit. I nodded, biting back the anger that surged in my chest. Errands. Is that what she called it now? I'm thinking about taking a half-day from work tomorrow, I said, testing her reaction. Maybe we could spend some time together? Just the two of us. Her smile faltered for a split second, just enough to let me know I'd hit a nerve. Oh, tomorrow? I actually already have plans with Sarah. We're going to grab lunch. I nodded slowly, pretending not to notice the slight hesitation in her voice. Of course. Maybe another time. She smiled, relief washing over her face. She thought she was safe. But that night, while she slept soundly beside me, I was already moving into the next phase. I sat up in bed, careful not to wake her, and pulled out my laptop. I had some work to do. First, I started by gathering everything I could find on Adam. His full name, his address, his work details, anything I could use to my advantage. The man was practically begging to be taken down. From what I could find, he wasn't exactly clean. A few minor legal issues, but nothing serious, yet. I'd use that to my advantage soon enough. Next, I set up a few more traps. I installed tracking software on Emily's phone without her knowledge, making sure I had access to her calls, texts, and location at all times. It wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about knowing every step she took, controlling the situation from every angle. I wanted her to feel the noose tightening, even if she didn't know why. In the following days, I kept up the act. I was the perfect husband, offering to cook dinner, making casual conversation. Emily, in turn, played her role, pretending to be the doting wife. But I could tell something had shifted in her. She was more distant, more cautious. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe she suspected something was wrong. Either way, I didn't care. I knew what I had to do. The trip I had suggested, the one to the mountains, was now officially on the calendar. A weekend getaway for the two of us. But this wouldn't be the romantic retreat she imagined. I was planning something else entirely. The night before we were set to leave, I received a message on my phone. It was from the tracking app, alerting me to her conversation with Adam. She was texting him under the guise of chatting with her friend Sarah. "Don't worry, he doesn't suspect a thing. I'm just going away with him for the weekend. It'll be fine." I clenched my jaw as I read it. She was lying straight to his face too. I almost admired her ability to keep it all together, juggling her deception so smoothly. But she wasn't as clever as she thought. The morning we left for the trip, I played the role of the loving husband perfectly. I packed the bags, loaded the car, and even picked up her favorite coffee on the way out of town. The entire time, my mind was racing with the plan I had been meticulously crafting. We arrived at the cabin in the mountains late that afternoon. It was secluded, just the two of us, exactly what she'd wanted. She was smiling as we pulled up, talking about how good it would be for us to reconnect. I smiled back, but inside, all I felt was cold anticipation. I had set things in motion, and now it was just a matter of time. That evening, as we sat by the fire, sipping wine, Emily looked over at me. "I'm glad we did this," she said softly, reaching for my hand. "I think we needed it." I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Yeah, me too." But what I didn't tell her was that this would be the last peaceful moment she would ever have with me. Tomorrow, everything would change. I would make sure of it. The trip wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about unraveling her world, piece by piece. And by the time we left the cabin, she wouldn't even recognize the life she thought she had control over. The next morning, the cabin was peaceful, almost too peaceful. Emily sat on the deck, sipping her coffee, oblivious to the storm that was coming. She looked out at the mountains, the early morning sun casting a soft glow on her face, like this was the perfect getaway for us to rekindle our love. But all I saw was a stranger. We had planned a hike that day. She seemed excited, eager even, as we set off into the woods. I played along, pretending that I was just as invested in this trip as she was. But my mind was elsewhere, focused on every step of the plan I'd laid out. We hiked for hours, stopping occasionally to take in the scenery or snap a photo. She talked about our future, where we could travel next, plans for remodeling the house, even the idea of starting a family. I felt the irony wash over me, her words twisting the knife that was already lodged deep in my chest. How could she be so delusional? How could she talk about a future with me when she was sneaking around with him behind my back? As we reached a secluded overlook, far from any trails, I decided to test the waters. "This is nice, isn't it?" I said, leaning against the rock, looking over the valley below. "Just us. No distractions." She smiled, her eyes soft. "Yeah, it's perfect. I feel like we really needed this." I nodded, turning to face her. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, Em. About everything we've been through." Her smile faltered slightly, a hint of something, worry maybe, flickered in her eyes. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. "I mean, I feel like there's been some distance between us. Like you've been distracted. Is there something you need to tell me?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. Her face paled slightly, and I could see her mind racing, trying to calculate the safest answer. She forced a laugh, brushing it off. "What? No, of course not. I've just been busy with work and everything." "Why? Is something wrong?" I studied her carefully, watching the way her fingers tightened around the water bottle she was holding. She was nervous. "No, nothing's wrong," I said smoothly. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. You know, open and honest. She nodded quickly, but I could tell she was on edge now. I let the moment hang there for a few more seconds before changing the subject, acting as if nothing had happened. But I had planted the seed of doubt, and that was enough. As we made our way back to the cabin later that afternoon, I noticed Emily checking her phone more frequently. She thought I didn't see it, but I did. Every glance at the screen was another piece of her guilt slipping through. She was restless, her mind clearly elsewhere. By the time we got back to the cabin, the tension between us was palpable. Emily excused herself to take a shower, and I took the opportunity to check the tracking app. Sure enough, while we had been hiking, she had messaged Adam. I read the exchange, my heart pounding with each word. Emily, I don't know what's going on. He's acting weird, like he knows something. Adam, you're being paranoid. Just stick to the plan. He doesn't know. You'll be fine. Emily, I hope you're right. I can't wait for this to be over. Over. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. Was she talking about us? About him? The ambiguity gnawed at me, but I knew one thing for sure: whatever her plan was, it wasn't going to play out the way she thought. I was about to take full control of the narrative. That evening, I suggested we have dinner by the fire. She seemed hesitant, her usual bubbly demeanor replaced by a nervous energy. But she agreed. I cooked while she sat quietly, sipping wine, lost in thought. I could feel her slipping, her grip on the lie unraveling slowly but surely. We sat in silence for most of the meal, the crackling of the fire filling the space between us. I watched her carefully, every flicker of emotion on her face. She was struggling to keep it together. You know, I said after a long stretch of silence, I've been thinking about us a lot lately. About our marriage. She looked up, her eyes wide, fear flashing across her face for a split second. Oh? What about it? I leaned back, taking a slow sip of my drink, letting the tension build. I just feel like something's been off. Like you've been distant. Distracted. Her hands shook slightly as she set down her wine glass. I don't know what you mean. We're fine, aren't we? I let her flounder, watching as she tried to maintain the facade. She was slipping, and she knew it. Are we? I asked, my voice calm, but with just enough edge to make her squirm. I mean, of course, she stammered, trying to force a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. We're good. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Then why are you lying to me, Emily? Her face went white. The blood drained from her cheeks, and for a moment she was speechless. She blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for words, but nothing came out. The moment stretched on, and I could see the panic setting in. She was caught, and she knew it. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally whispered, her voice shaking. I let out a low chuckle, shaking my head. Come on, Em. Don't insult me. I know everything. Her eyes filled with tears, and I could see the weight of her lies crashing down on her. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I stayed silent, letting her unravel in front of me. I love you, she said, her voice cracking. I swear I do. It was a mistake. I didn't know how to stop it. Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I stood up, walked around the table, and knelt in front of her. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that her world was crumbling. I don't believe you, I said quietly, my voice cold and detached. The tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. This was only the beginning of her downfall. Emily sat frozen, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she stared at me, searching for any sign of forgiveness. But she would find none. I stood up slowly, walking to the window and looking out into the dark woods. The peaceful isolation of the cabin had shifted into something tense, almost sinister. I've been thinking about what you just said, I began, not turning around. That it was a mistake. That you didn't know how to stop it. My voice was steady, cold. But see, that's the part one don't believe. She let out a shaky breath, her sobs quieting. Please, I'll explain everything. Just give me a chance. I turned back to face her, my expression unreadable. A chance? Do you think I haven't given you enough chances already, Emily? She blinked at me, clearly taken aback. She hadn't expected this version of me, the one who wasn't breaking down, the one who wasn't falling apart. She expected a shattered man, someone she could manipulate back into her grasp. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not after what I'd seen. I want to know everything, I said, walking slowly toward her. How long, how many times, all of it. No more lies. She wiped at her eyes, her hands trembling. It was him, she whispered. Just Adam. I swear. It was only him. I sat back down across from her, folding my hands on the table, waiting for her to continue. The silence between us was deafening. We met a few months ago, she finally said, her voice barely audible. He did some landscaping for us and… I don't know. It just happened. We started texting, then meeting up. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Like what? I asked, leaning forward, my voice dangerously low. Like a full-blown affair? She winced, her face crumbling. It was a mistake, she repeated. I thought I could end it, but I didn't. I didn't want to lose you. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep the rage from boiling over. You didn't want to lose me, but you didn't mind sleeping with him, right? She broke down again, sobbing into her hands. The sight of it did nothing for me. Her tears, her regret, it was all too late. I let her cry for a while, the sound echoing in the quiet cabin. Then, calmly, I asked, Does he know about this weekend? About us being here? She hesitated, glancing up at me with wide, teary eyes. I didn't tell him much. He knows we're away, but that's it. I nodded, processing her words. She didn't realize it yet, but she was sealing her fate. Every detail she revealed, every piece of this twisted puzzle, was falling right into place. She was giving me all the ammunition I needed, without even knowing it. Okay, I said quietly, standing up again. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call him. Her eyes widened in shock, panic flooding her face. What? No, I can't. Yes, you can. I cut her off, my voice firm. You're going to tell him it's over. Right now. In front of me. She shook her head frantically, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Please don't make me do this. I'll end it when we get back. Now, Emily, I said, my voice cold as ice. Or I walk out that door, and you'll never see me again. That shut her up. She stared at me, her tear-streaked face pale and full of terror. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She grabbed her phone off the table with shaking hands, dialing the number she thought I didn't know. I watched, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction as she held the phone to her ear, her fingers trembling. The phone rang once, twice, then I heard his voice on the other end, faint but unmistakable. Hey you, Adam said, his tone playful. Miss me already? She glanced at me, her face twisted in fear. Adam, I can't talk for long, she stammered, her voice wavering. We need to stop this. I can't do it anymore. There was silence on the other end. I could practically hear the gears turning in Adam's head. He hadn't expected this. What are you talking about? Adam finally asked, his voice tight. What's going on? Emily looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I stood firm, staring her down. She had no way out. I'm with him, she whispered, her voice cracking. My husband. He knows. Another long pause. I could almost feel Adam's shock, his confusion. Then, his voice hardened. You're serious? Yes, she whispered, barely able to speak through her tears. I'm sorry. I didn't want it to end like this, but it's over. I reached out and grabbed the phone from her hand, cutting her off before she could say another word. Without hesitation, I spoke into the receiver. Adam, I said, my voice calm, but laced with menace. If you ever contact my wife again, if I ever see you near her or my house, I will ruin you. Do you understand? There was a long pause, and I could feel the tension on the other end of the line. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Who the hell do you think you are? I let out a low chuckle, the sound cold and humorless. I'm the man who holds all the cards, Adam. And trust me, you don't want to find out what happens if you push me. Without waiting for a response, I hung up the phone and tossed it back onto the table. Emily sat there, her face pale, her body trembling. It's done, I said quietly, standing up and walking toward the door. Get some sleep. Where are you going? She asked, her voice small and broken. I paused at the door, glancing back at her. Out. I need some air. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving her alone in the cabin, broken and terrified. But this was only the beginning. I wasn't finished with her yet. Not by a long shot. The cold air bit at my skin as I stepped outside. The night was quiet, but inside my head, everything was chaos. Emily's sobs, Adam's shocked silence on the phone, they replayed in my mind, over and over. I should have felt relief, maybe even triumph. But instead I felt hollow. I leaned against the side of the cabin, taking a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside. The thing was, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about control, something I hadn't felt in a long time. My marriage had been a lie, my life a joke, and now, for the first time, I was holding all the pieces. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The next day, I woke up early, long before Emily. The tension from last night still hung thick in the air, but I didn't address it. I didn't need to. I was already moving to the next phase of my plan. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the messages on the tracking app I'd installed. Adam hadn't tried to contact her since the call last night. Maybe he was smarter than I gave him credit for. Good, because if he tried, I'd destroy him. Emily woke up a few hours later, her face pale, her eyes red from crying all night. I watched her as she moved around the cabin, her movements slow, unsure. She barely looked at me, and when she did, it was with fear. I could see the weight of everything sinking in. Her affair wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a ticking bomb. And I was holding the detonator. Morning, I said, my voice casual, as if nothing had happened the night before. She gave me a weak smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Morning. I stood up from the table, stretching as if this was just another ordinary day. I was thinking we could head into town today. Maybe get some fresh air. What do you think? Her hesitation was brief, but there. She nodded. Sure. Sounds good. As we drove down the winding mountain roads toward the small town nearby, I could feel her glancing at me from the passenger seat. She was probably wondering what I was thinking, whether I'd forgiven her, or if I was planning something worse. She was right to worry. We spent the afternoon walking through the town, browsing little shops, pretending everything was normal. But beneath the surface, the tension was building. I could see it in the way her eyes darted around, like she was waiting for something bad to happen. She had no idea how bad it would get. Back at the cabin, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew it was time to make my next move. I needed to turn up the heat. We sat by the fire again that night, Emily curled up on the couch with a blanket, pretending to read a book. I could feel the distance between us, like a chasm she couldn't cross. She was trying to act like nothing had changed, but the truth was, everything had. You know, I started, breaking the silence. I've been thinking about us. She looked up, her eyes wide with that same mixture of fear and guilt. Oh? I nodded slowly, letting the tension build. Yeah. I think we need a fresh start. Her eyes flickered with confusion and a faint hope. A fresh start? Yeah. Something different. A way for us to rebuild trust. The word hung in the air like a challenge. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I want that too, she whispered. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Good. Because I've already started. Her face paled again, her knuckles going white as she gripped the edges of the blanket. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm, even. "I've been thinking about Adam." She flinched at the mention of his name, her body tensing. "And I realized," I continued, "that it's not enough for you to just end things with him. He's still out there, living his life, while mine fell apart. That doesn't seem fair, does it?" Her eyes widened in panic. "Please, I already told him it's over." "He won't." "I'm not talking about you and him," I interrupted, my tone sharp. "I'm talking about him. His life. You see, I did some digging." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like she was about to cry again, but I wasn't about to let her play the victim. "He's not exactly squeaky clean," I said, my voice cold. "A few run-ins with the law. Some financial trouble. Wouldn't it be a shame if all that came crashing down on him at once?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" I leaned back, my smile tight. "I'm going to ruin him, Emily. And you're going to help me." She shook her head frantically, her voice cracking. "No. No, please. I can't." "You don't have a choice," I said flatly. "If you want to save this marriage, if you want any hope of moving forward, you're going to do exactly what I tell you. And we're going to make sure Adam knows what happens when you mess with someone's wife." She was sobbing now, her hands covering her face, but I didn't feel a shred of pity. This was her fault. She made her bed, and now she'd have to lie in it. "I'll tell him," she gasped between sobs. "I'll tell him whatever you want. Just please don't do this." I stood up, towering over her, as she crumbled into herself. "It's already done. You'll call him tomorrow, and you'll convince him to meet you. When you do, I'll be there. And when we're done, he'll wish he never met you." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading, but I was already turning away, my mind set. This wasn't just about hurting her anymore. It was about making her feel the consequences of her choices in the worst way possible. And Adam? He'd be the perfect pawn in the game. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of calm. Emily was in the guest room, probably crying herself to sleep. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally in control. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The next morning, the tension in the cabin was thick, almost suffocating. Emily's eyes were red and swollen from crying all night, her body moving like she was walking through a fog of guilt and fear. I watched her silently as I made breakfast, my mind already set on what had to happen next. I didn't speak to her much, just simple instructions. I told her to get ready and make the call to Adam. She hesitated, the phone trembling in her hand. I could see the fear, the regret swirling in her eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about her feelings. This was about making sure she paid for what she did. "Do it," I said quietly, but firmly. "And don't screw it up." Her fingers fumbled with the screen as she dialed his number. I stood there, listening closely, my heart pounding in a steady rhythm, but my face remained cold, emotionless. The phone rang, and finally, he answered. "Hey, you." Adam's voice came through the speaker, light and casual. The sound of it made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. "Adam, we need to talk. Can you meet me today?" There was a pause on his end. He must have been confused. "What's going on? I thought we already—" "Please," Emily cut him off, her voice almost breaking. "Just meet me. At the usual place." I could hear the hesitation in Adam's voice, but eventually he gave in. "All right. Usual place, then." She hung up, staring down at the phone like it was a ticking bomb in her hands. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I took the phone from her and tossed it onto the couch. "Now we get ready. We're going to meet him together." The drive to the meeting spot was eerily quiet. Emily didn't speak, and neither did I. I could feel the tension radiating off her, but she knew better than to say anything. She was trapped, and she knew it. The plan was already in motion, and there was no backing out now. We arrived at a quiet park, secluded and perfect for what needed to be done. Emily led the way to the spot where she and Adam usually met, a clearing behind some trees far from the main paths. It was almost laughable how predictable they were. We didn't have to wait long. Adam showed up a few minutes later, looking as smug and confident as ever. But that smugness faded when he saw me standing next to her. His brow furrowed, confusion and panic flickering across his face. What's this?" Adam asked, his voice tight with suspicion. I stepped forward, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder, making sure he saw the control I had over her. "This is the end of the game, Adam." He blinked, still trying to process what was happening. "What are you talking about?" Emily looked at the ground, avoiding his eyes. She couldn't even speak. But I had no such hesitation. "You see, I've been watching," I said, my voice calm but laced with menace. "I know everything. And now, it's time to make sure you understand what happens when you mess with another man's wife." Adam took a step back, his face paling. "Look, man, I didn't know." "Didn't know?" I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You thought you could sneak around, play your little games, and no one would find out." Adam's eyes darted toward Emily, searching for some kind of explanation or help, but she stayed silent, her body shaking under the weight of everything she had done. "You've been in my house," I continued, stepping closer to him. "You've been in my bed. You think I'm just going to let that go? I'm sorry, all right?" Adam stammered, his voice full of panic now. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't know she was married when we first—" I laughed, the sound cold and humorless. "Save it. I'm not interested in your excuses." Adam glanced around nervously, realizing he was trapped. There was no one else around, no one to help him. "Look, man, if you want me to disappear, I will. You'll never see me again." I shook my head slowly. "It's too late for that. You've already ruined everything. And now I'm going to ruin you." Emily finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Please don't hurt him." I ignored her, focusing on Adam, who was practically trembling at this point. "I know about your record, Adam. I know about the trouble you've gotten into. And I've made sure that if you ever come near her, or me, again, you're going to lose everything. I've got the evidence. I've got everything I need to destroy you." Adam's eyes widened in horror. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the folder I had created, filled with everything I'd found, his financial troubles, his run-ins with the law, and the evidence of his affair with Emily. I had it all, perfectly documented and ready to be used. "I can send this to the cops," I said, my voice low and threatening. "To your boss, to your friends, to everyone you know. One word from me, and your life is over." Adam's face strained of color. He knew I wasn't bluffing. "Please," he begged, his voice shaking. "I'll do anything. Just don't do this." I looked at him for a long moment, watching the fears sink in. Then, with cold finality, I said, "You're going to leave. You're going to pack up, disappear, and never come back. If I ever see or hear from you again, if you even so much as text her, you'll regret it." He nodded frantically, his eyes wide with desperation. "I swear. You'll never see me again." I stepped back, giving him room to escape. Without another word, Adam turned and practically sprinted back to his car. Emily watched him go, her face pale, her body trembling. I didn't care what she felt. Not anymore. As Adam's car disappeared down the road, I turned to Emily. "It's done," I said simply. She stared at me, tears welling up in her eyes again. "What now?" she whispered, her voice shaky. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked back toward the car, knowing she would follow. I had one final move left, one last piece of the puzzle to set in place. We drove back in silence, the weight of everything crushing down on both of us. Emily didn't ask questions. She knew better by now. When we got home, she collapsed on the couch, her body and mind exhausted from the emotional hell she had just been through. But I wasn't done. I had made Adam disappear, but Emily still had to pay for what she did. There was one more step left in my plan, and it would be the hardest blow of all. As she sat there, broken and defeated, I calmly walked to the bedroom and returned with a stack of papers. I dropped them on the coffee table in front of her, watching as her eyes flickered with confusion. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Divorce papers," I said coldly. She stared at them, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the words, but none came. The reality of what was happening hit her like a freight train. "You didn't think we were staying together after this, did you?" I asked, my voice icy. "You destroyed us. You threw it all away. And now you're going to live with the consequences." Her face crumbled, and she broke into sobs again. But I didn't care. This was the final step in reclaiming my life, the part where I got to walk away and watch her suffer. "It's over, Emily," I said quietly. "Sign the papers, and don't ever contact me again." Her sobs filled the room, but I felt nothing. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door without looking back. As I drove away, the weight of everything lifted from my shoulders. I was free from her, from the lies, from the pain. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. As I drove away from the cabin, the silence in the car felt different, heavier. It wasn't the kind of silence that soothed you. It was the kind that lingered with the echoes of what I'd just done. The divorce papers were the final nail in the coffin, and Emily's world had just crumbled to dust. I should have felt triumphant, maybe even satisfied. But as I left her sobbing in that cabin, something gnawed at me. It wasn't regret. No, I didn't regret a single thing I'd done. She deserved every moment of the pain she felt, every tear that rolled down her face. But the calm satisfaction I had expected didn't come. It was like I'd been running toward this moment, certain it would be the closure I needed, but now that I'd reached it, I felt hollow. I drove for hours, not really heading anywhere in particular, just needing to escape the weight of everything. My phone buzzed a few times, probably Emily, maybe even Adam trying to scramble for more control. I ignored it. I didn't need to hear from either of them ever again. I had done my part. I had burned everything down to the ground, and there was no going back. By the time I returned home, the house felt strange. Cold. The walls seemed to close in on me, reminding me that this had been our home, the place we built together, and now it was just mine. The silence was suffocating, not the freedom I thought it would be. I dropped my keys on the counter, walking through the house, taking it all in. Emily wasn't here anymore. And soon, she wouldn't be in my life at all. The divorce papers were signed, metaphorically if not literally yet, and that meant one thing: I was free. But why didn't I feel free? The following days were a blur of paperwork, lawyers, and cold, emotionless conversations. Emily didn't fight the divorce. She was too broken, too defeated. Every interaction we had was distant, formal. She looked at me with a sadness that didn't touch me anymore. I didn't care what she felt, not after what she had done. She had taken everything from me, the love, the trust, the life we had built, and shattered it. But now, she was the one who had to pick up the pieces. And me? I was supposed to move on. I was supposed to rebuild. But it wasn't that simple. It wasn't long before the whispers started. Family. Friends. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know the details. Emily hadn't told anyone, at least not the whole story. She was ashamed, and rightfully so. But I couldn't care less what people thought. I was tired of pretending, tired of holding everything in. So, when the questions came, "What happened? Why the divorce?" I told the truth. "She cheated," I said bluntly, emotionlessly. "That's why." It was like dropping a bomb in every conversation. The reactions were predictable: shock, disbelief, sympathy. But I didn't want sympathy. I didn't need it. I just wanted people to understand that this wasn't some mutual parting. It was her betrayal that had driven me to this point. The thing was, people weren't as surprised as I expected. Some of them had seen the signs. Others had heard the rumors. It was like the entire world had known before I did, and that infuriated me. How could they have seen it, when I'd been too blind to? Emily tried to call me a few times. She left voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. At first, I ignored them. But after a few days, curiosity got the better of me. I played them back, one after another. Please, let's talk. I need to explain. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I don't know how to fix it. I'm so sorry. I love you. I don't know what I was thinking. The words were all the same: apologies, regret, pleas for forgiveness. But they fell on deaf ears. I didn't have anything left to say to her. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. The life we had was dead, and there was no resurrecting it. But something unexpected happened a few weeks later. One of the last loose ends I hadn't tied up, the detail I hadn't anticipated, was Adam. I thought he had disappeared, just like I had told him to. I thought he was smart enough to leave town and never look back. But one afternoon, while I was at work, I received an email. It was from Adam. I hesitated before opening it. What could he possibly want? He was supposed to be gone, a distant memory. But curiosity got the better of me. I clicked the email, my heart pounding in my chest. The message was short, but its impact hit me like a freight train. You think you can just destroy me? You don't know who you're messing with. I'm not done yet. Attached to the email was a video file. I stared at it, my mind racing. Another video? What was this? I debated whether to open it, my pulse quickening. But I had to know. I clicked on the file. The video was shaky, low quality, like it had been recorded on a cheap phone. It showed Adam, sitting in his car, speaking directly into the camera. His voice was calm, too calm, and it sent a chill down my spine. You think you're the only one who can play games? Adam said, his eyes cold and dark. I've been watching. I've been waiting. And now it's my turn. He paused, a sick smile spreading across his face. You're not the only one with secrets. The video cut off abruptly, leaving me staring at the screen, my mind racing with questions. What did he mean? What was he planning? I had thought I was in control. I had thought I had won. But now, it felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Adam wasn't gone. He was still out there, still playing his own twisted game. And I had no idea what his next move would be. The satisfaction I had felt after confronting him, after tearing his life apart, was gone. Replaced by something darker, something far more dangerous. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the dread that had settled over me after receiving Adam's email. His words replayed in my mind on a loop. You're not the only one with secrets. What did that mean? What did he know that I didn't? I had thought I was the one pulling the strings. I had thought I had him backed into a corner. But now, it felt like the tables had turned, and I had no idea what was coming next. He was still out there, lurking in the shadows, and that made him dangerous. I stayed up late every night after that, searching for clues, obsessively checking my phone, my email, anything that might give me a hint about what he was planning. But nothing came. No follow-up messages, no strange phone calls. Just silence. And that silence was louder than any threat he could have made. But then, a week later, the phone rang. I had just gotten home from work. The house was quiet, the divorce papers still sitting on the coffee table where Emily had left them after she signed them. I hadn't filed them yet. Part of me was still processing everything, but I knew it was time. I needed to close this chapter. I needed to move on. The phone buzzed in my pocket, and I froze when I saw the caller ID, unknown number. My heart raced. It could be him. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Hello? There was silence on the other end, followed by a low chuckle. My blood turned to ice. Miss me? It was Adam. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you want? What do I want? He repeated, the smirk clear in his voice. I think the question is, what do you want? Because I have something you're going to want to see. My pulse quickened. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the truth, Adam said slowly, drawing out the words. The truth about Emily. The truth about what's really been going on. You thought you knew everything, didn't you? But you don't. Not even close. I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone tighter. You're lying. Am I? He laughed again, the sound cold and mocking. You thought you had me all figured out. You thought you could scare me off. But you don't even know the half of it. There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing on the other end, waiting for my response. But I didn't know what to say. Was this just another game? Or was he telling the truth? Meet me, Adam finally said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'll show you everything. Then you can decide if you're still in control. I hesitated. Meeting him was dangerous, I knew that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the final piece of the puzzle. Something I had missed. Something I needed to see. Where? I asked, my voice tight. Adam gave me an address, an abandoned lot on the outskirts of town. Of course. Somewhere remote, somewhere isolated. Somewhere no one would hear us if things went south. I hung up the phone without saying another word, my mind racing. This was it. The final confrontation. Whatever Adam had planned, I needed to face it head on. I wasn't about to let him take control of this narrative. When I arrived at the lot, the sun had already set, and the only light came from the flickering street lamp near the entrance. Adam's car was parked off to the side, his silhouette visible in the driver's seat. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I pulled up next to him, the tension crackling in the air like electricity. I got out of the car, my heart pounding, and walked toward him. He stepped out, meeting me halfway, his face illuminated by the dim light. He looked calm, too calm, like he was enjoying this, like he was relishing the power he thought he had. You came, Adam said, smirking. I wasn't sure you would. Get to the point, I snapped, my patience hanging by a thread. What do you have? Adam tilted his head, watching me with that same cold smile. Always so direct. Fine. Let's get to it then. He pulled out his phone, holding it up like a weapon. You see, you thought you knew everything about Emily's affair. But there's more. A lot more. You weren't the only one she betrayed. I froze, my stomach turning. What are you talking about? Adam grinned, enjoying my discomfort. There were others before me. Did she tell you that? Or did you really believe you were the only one who got cheated on? The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My mind reeled. Was this true? Had there been more before him? Before everything I knew about? Bullshit, I spat, trying to keep my voice steady. You're lying. Am I? Adam pulled up something on his phone and shoved it in my face. It was a video, but not one I had seen before. This wasn't the one she had accidentally sent me. This was older. Different. And it wasn't Adam in the video. It was another man. I felt the world tilt beneath me as I stared at the screen. Emily was there, with him, in the same way she had been with Adam. The same room. The same bed. But this was from months, maybe even years, ago. Long before Adam. How many? I demanded, my voice barely a whisper. Adam shrugged, slipping his phone back into his pocket. Does it matter? The point is, you thought you were in control. You thought you had it all figured out. But you were just another idiot in her web of lies. I could feel the anger rising in me, hot and uncontrollable. I had spent months, maybe years, fighting for the truth, tearing my life apart to expose her betrayal. And now, here I was, finding out that it had all been deeper, darker than I could have imagined. You should have just left it alone, Adam said quietly, his voice smug. But now you know. And there's nothing you can do about it. I snapped. Before I realized what I was doing, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward. I didn't stop. I lunged at him, years of rage and betrayal boiling over in a single moment of blinding fury. I could hear him grunt in pain as I hit him again and again, my vision blurred by the haze of my anger. "Is this what you wanted?" I shouted, my voice raw with emotion. "To destroy me? To take everything from me?" Adam didn't answer. He just laughed, a low, weak sound that only fueled my rage. I hit him one last time, hard enough to knock him to the ground, his body crumpling under the impact. I stood there, breathing heavily, my fists shaking as I looked down at him. He was still alive, groaning in pain, but I knew I could have killed him if I wanted to. But I didn't. I stepped back, my chest heaving, as the reality of what I had done settled over me. I had let him get to me. I had let his lies, his manipulations, drag me down to his level. And in that moment, I realized something. He didn't matter. Emily didn't matter. None of it mattered anymore. I turned and walked back to my car, leaving Adam on the ground, beaten and broken. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The war was over. And in the end I had won. But the victory was hollow. Because in the end, the only thing left standing was the wreckage of everything I had lost. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit like and leave a comment with your favorite part. We'd love to hear your perspective.